is the starting lineup. Here's your host, Karl Schoening.
Welcome into the starting lineup. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, starting at the voice coming through your speakers. LG is in the starting lineup with me this morning as we have a Spurs versus Knicks finals preview here on Ticket 760 this morning. And, you know, I got myself excited this morning because it is media day, and I think there might have been some remnants of media day yesterday. There was a lot of media that came out about the NBA and this upcoming finals matchup, as there will be plenty to talk about in this week, this series. There's a lot that I think we can take some storylines away from. That's the Knicks, that's the Spurs. They met in the NBA Cup Finals. It's Victor Wembanyama going up against the entire city of New York. There's plenty of history in those areas, as the Spurs will eventually take on the New York Knicks. I am so happy that you guys joined us here this morning, and we are trying a little something new on the stream. So if we are coming through loud and clear, I'm going to make sure that LG is checking the stream before we get rolling. But I spent a good chunk of this morning before the show watching the replay of, unfortunately, what I think is the most realistic expectations of the matchup between the Spurs and the Knicks, which is the March 1st matchup. And the big thing about that was that the Spurs jumped out to an early lead, and then they started fouling a lot of free throws. A 15-2 run to end the first quarter made things even at 22 apiece. Heading into the second quarter, a big run by the Knicks really created some separation going into halftime. And then as we moved on into the rest of the game, the Spurs tried their best. Wemby had his jump shot going, but the Knicks are a really good team, and they ended up creating some arm's length separation, and the Spurs were unable to carry on and come back from behind. But you know, one of the things I talked about was I want to throw that game out in a way, because the Spurs are somebody who they have a, I guess, really good ability to play most days and times, but I feel like it was a noon start at MSG, and it was the Sunday showcase on ESPN. Ryan Ruocco was on the call, and it was ended up being a win for the Knicks. And then, you know, part of that is because I think the Spurs are just a little bit slower on game days. And there's a little bit of additional, I guess, momentum going there for the Knicks, in the sense that they were in MSG and they were trying to knock off the Spurs, who had won 11 straight, and they proceeded to just go ahead and not get the momentum they needed to come back from that early deficit. The Spurs had only lost on January 31st. Right before that, and also an early game, that was the Charlotte game, and then they proceeded to drop the first game of the regular season when the after an undefeated February. So I'm going to bring in LG real quick. LG, we're trying a little something new, and a little peek behind the curtain. You are producing in a way here, and at the moment, are you saying that we're not going out over radio?
No, I just was saying I didn't hear any programming when the show started. I didn't hear the show intro, and so. Oh,
as in over your feed to you?
Yeah.
Okay, no. Definitely the intro
personally.
played.
Yeah,
the intro definitely played on Ticket 760. And
well,
you know,
not in my ears.
Yeah, no. I'm keeping that to myself, I guess, and it's the only way to, you know, not be able to send it out over to your ears. But
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, you don't. That's the goal of what we're trying to mess around with in this new stream setup, is trying to maybe create a little bit more of a reason for you guys to come over to our YouTube page. So this way we can maybe just have the conversation continue as we finish up the show. When we have a break here in the show, we'll just go ahead and continue the conversation on the stream. So that's the goal. And we want to make it an interactive show. So if you guys want to jump in and send me a tweet or leave a comment in the YouTube page, we certainly hope that you guys will interact with the show in some way. Want to hear what your thoughts are on this Spurs and Knicks series, as The Knicks, I think, are a really good basketball team. I don't necessarily. Jalen Brunson's obviously a superstar, and they also have a really good core of players that are above average role players, but might not necessarily be considered all-star or all NBA players. And that'll be what the Spurs need to, I guess, figure out is how are they going to limit the team that's similar in a sense that the Knicks are just like the Spurs, and I guess almost every finals team, they are greater than the sum of their total parts. You have a lot of people that are going to be able to contribute, and the one reason I like to look at that March 1st game as the unfortunate real, expectation of how the series could go is they ended up getting, between these two teams, the biggest trade deadline acquisition in Jose Alvarado. Alvarado is somebody who can come in and speed up the game, get some steals. I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard he has probably one of the best nicknames in the NBA and Grand Theft Alvarado. And he is somebody who will definitely create some pesky defense and also just get to the rim and create some offense just by being this sort of energy bug. I don't necessarily know if he is going to have an impact better than Dylan Harper, but the Spurs do have to worry about him being sort of the backup point guard. But the thing is, Jalen Brunson's going to be playing a whole lot in this series. He's going to have to be the first head of the snake that the Spurs have to handle. And there's questions that go into, are the Spurs going to maybe, deal with the Jalen Brunson effect where they just double team him in the same way they double teamed SGA or Anthony Edwards, or are they going to maybe come up with something entirely new? That'll be one of the things that I think will be the big questions we have to ask here when it comes to the Spurs and the Knicks in this first game. It starts with Jalen Brunson on the New York Knicks side of things. He is a dynamic scorer. He is only, I think, generously listed at 6'2". But he is somebody who knows how to get to his spots. He's not going to finish above the rim, but he is going to cross you over and hit a mid-range jumper. He'll knock down three balls. He'll get to the rim and scoop it over. So it comes down to the star. If it comes down to the star players, I think the Spurs have the better star player in Wemby. He's the best player in the world, and that's starting to really catch on in the national media trend of things. Then you also have the question of, are the Spurs going to have maybe the better wings in this series? It's a tough question there to ask because you have Mikal Bridges, who is the NBA's Iron Man. He hasn't missed a game, I want to say, his entire career, but certainly since his Phoenix days. He's approaching 1,000 straight games played, and he's somebody who can potentially be the best wing in this series. You have Josh Hart, who's a similar energy guy on the wing. He can create a lot of defensive mismatches, and he could be somebody that the Knicks occasionally throw at Wemby. You have OG Anunoby, who's the leading favorite to say that he's going to be the person who guards Victor Wembanyama. And you also have Karl Anthony Towns, who's going to get his crack and chance to defend Victor Wembanyama as well. So you have a few players on the Knicks that on both sides of the ball are a bit interesting, but the Knicks do a good job passing the ball around. They're probably going to be the best shooting team that the Spurs have seen all season long. And the Knicks are really going to be a challenge for these Spurs. I think that when you talk about the most challenging team, it happens to probably be the finals team because, just to be honest with you guys, I know Oklahoma City was a tough team to beat. And, hey, looks like Greg Castanuelos is in here, and he says, good morning, fellas. Karl's Corner, nice lighting. Yeah, thank you for joining us here on the show. And, we appreciate you interacting with the show in the comments. And I think, LG, you were a little worried about the widget. I got the widget right. Yeah, hey, so that's why you guys got to check it out. I'm sort of messing around with it a little bit.
Yeah, we'll have to see once the comments start stacking up if they cover up any of the camera feeds there. So
hey,
we'll see what happens.
Spam the comments. Give us more likes, comments, and all that good stuff to help us on the algorithm on the YouTube page. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate you joining us. But LG, I think one of the things that will come down to the Knicks here is how they defend Victor Wembanyama, and then it comes down to if they can keep him out of the paint, is Wemby going to be a shooter? And it seemed to me at MSG in the March 1st matchup, he was actually hitting his shots. And you get to experience it firsthand like me. Once he's hitting his shots, it feels like there's nothing that anybody can do. Hey, I appreciate you again, Greg. Yeah, keep spamming. I want to see if we can cover up LG. But yeah, when it comes to, I guess, the Spurs and the Knicks, really, it starts on both sides of the best players, and then we can work our way down through the role players and the bench players. But I feel like the Spurs match up very well against New York. Their only two big men that they're going to be able to throw at Wemby are the aforementioned OG Anunoby and Karl Anthony Towns, but then you're also going to have Mitchell Robinson coming off the bench. We'll have to see how Mitchell Robinson looks. He did break his pinky, but he's more out there for defense and rebounds. He got surgery to be able to play in the finals, so I don't know necessarily what we're going to see exactly from the Knicks in the NBA Finals in terms of Mitchell Robinson's effectiveness, because now that I think about it, you do kind of need your pinky to grab a rebound. But
yeah, pinky's a pretty important phalange. Is it a phalange? Phalanges.
I know what you're saying.
Pinky and thumb are probably the two most important fingers on your hand.
Can you grab a rebound with just your ring finger? I'm trying to feel it right now. He is a big guy. Mitchell Robinson's 7'1". He is one of the more interesting stories in the NBA. He was committed to Western Kentucky of all places. I think the NCAA found out about some improper benefits, ends up not really even playing there. And then next thing you know, he just decides to go ahead and go on into the NBA. But that is what it is, I suppose, is that Mitchell Robinson has actually carved himself out a pretty good NBA career. He actually broke a Wilt Chamberlain record in terms of season-long field goal percentage. Wilt was at somewhere around 73%, and then they went ahead and also brought on what happened? What happened exactly? It's a funny story. Mitchell Robinson in the 2019-2020 season was on track to break the Wilt Chamberlain record, and play stopped. And the Knicks were not good enough to get into the bubble, and they ended up proceeding to, I guess, stop this season. But even though he still had how many games that was when they stopped play in the NBA in March of 2020, they decided to say, yes, everything that's official is official. And he did end up coming away with the NBA's record for field goal percentage in a season. So, Mitchell Robinson, he's not a pushover either. However, when you talk about the other teams that the Spurs have faced, with like a Rudy Gobert and a Julius Randle for the Timberwolves, and Isaiah Hartenstein and a Chet Holmgren for the Thunder, it sort of feels like the Spurs are ready for whatever big men. And OG Anunoby is probably the most versatile defender of them all. And there's a clip of OG playing pretty good defense against Wemby. But you have to remember there were more highlights than just that one defensive highlight. And Greg, appreciate you continuing to spam here as we're testing out this new setup. He says they also have Jose Alvarado. He's a feisty player. Yeah, I mentioned that at the jump. Jose Alvarado could be the X factor. So, it's a finals matchup. We're going to talk about all of those little down-the-line players. But, again, when it comes to the start of the head of the snakes for either team, it's Wemby on the Spurs and Jalen Brunson on the other. I do want to get into all of those details in the upcoming segments here in the starting lineup, as it's the finals. You got to break down everything. It feels like the Super Bowl, and it is the Super Bowl for the NBA, except we get 7 of these, or potentially 7 of these games. We get at least 4, and a couple of them are in the Mecca, Madison Square Garden, and we can maybe get into how Wemby is somebody who didn't play well in his first game in Madison Square Garden, and he heard the chants of overrated. And let me tell you, I get the feeling Wemby's going to take that a little bit personally. He's somebody who finds maybe every little thing that he can to motivate himself. There's a lot of people that are comparing him to there's a lot of people that are comparing Wemby to Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, and it's the sense of, yeah, he is somebody who will find just a little bit of bulletin support to maybe give him a little bit more energy there. And Greg once again says the true X factor is Jeremy Sohan. What about Jeremy, man? Like, I don't think he's going to play in this series. However, what a benefit for the Knicks. I don't think the Spurs necessarily, when they released Jeremy Sohan, were thinking, and I think that there was internet reportings that the Spurs knew he was going to probably sign with the Knicks and not a Western Conference rival and stuff like that. He still ends up on a team that the Spurs play in the NBA Finals, and there's a lot of memes going around that says no matter what, Jeremy Sohan is an NBA champion. So I guess that's technically true. So yeah, but on top of that, he does have just some insight. He was in the second year with Wemby, and that was one of those things where the Spurs had to, I guess, just figure out how to play with Wemby, and the Spurs decided just to move on from Jeremy Sohan because, honestly, as good as Jeremy was, I thought that he was good. He got beat out by Julian Champagnie, and it reminded me a lot of the James Anderson, Danny Green situation, where James Anderson was the first-round draft pick, but Danny Green was the undrafted player who ended up being a better shooter, and shooting in the NBA in the modern era is king over overall versatility. But yeah, you're right, Greg. He gets a ring no matter what. That's crazy, and that's great. I appreciate you interacting with us in the chat, Greg. Appreciate all y'all tuning in, whether it be over the AM 760 frequency or over the iHeartRadio app or our YouTube page, whatever it might be. This is the starting lineup. We're going to be talking a whole bunch of Spurs as we continue here on the starting lineup. I'm going to step aside here on our frequency, but I think the conversation will be able to continue when we come back on the stream. So just keep it tuned into the stream if you want to hear the continuing of the conversation, and then we will go ahead and come back here on the other side on Ticket 760. This is the starting lineup. Welcome back to the starting lineup. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, still figuring out a couple technical things here as we try out something new here on the show. Hey, we have Hanover Fist in here saying y'all good. Appreciate y'all for joining us on the show here as I'm in the starting lineup with LG today, and we want to resume the show by talking about the Spurs and the Knicks. And we talk about the big two guys, what Jalen Brunson needs to do, what Victor Wembanyama needs to do to inflict their will on the game. And the thing about Jalen Brunson is he's just like, I guess, every other point guard, is that he's not necessarily going to severely impact the game defensively, but he is going to be somebody who will impact the game offensively. So once he figures out how to score on the Spurs, that's almost where he, I guess, meets his point on one side of the ball. Wemby's somebody who can defend both sides of the ball. However, they do have some very impactful defensive playmakers. Josh Hart is somebody who will really go off for the Spurs, and I guess not go off for the Spurs, but he will be somebody who the Spurs have to be careful to make sure he doesn't go off on them. He can knock down the occasional three. He's not necessarily a sharp shooter, but he'll get offensive rebounds, which have hurt the Spurs occasionally. He'll be a wing that will bring a lot of energy, and whoever does draw the Josh Hart assignment is going to have to really go hard and defend him pretty strong, and all of the issues there that might come up with I would say if Josh Hart's going to be guarded by somebody, it's either going to be Julian Champagnie or Devin Vassell. So those two guys are going to have their work cut out for him. It's going to be an energy forward that you're dealing with all game long for the New York Knicks. You know, the one thing that I'm a little curious about when it comes to the Knicks is how do they keep the Spurs from getting their best offense, which is their defense creating their offense. The Spurs will get out and run, and the Knicks are going to have to get back in transition. But the one thing that I've noticed here in these finals, Wemby starts off, or not these finals, but these playoffs, Wemby starts off with a 12-block game against the Portland Trailblazers. However, the one thing about being somebody who chases down blocks is that you're creating an opportunity for the guy that you leave to block the shot to be an offensive rebounder. So you have to be mindful of that if you're the Knicks. If Wemby's going to leave to contest a shot, then you're going to have the opportunity to maybe grab an offensive rebound if Wemby doesn't get to that shot. So Wemby, I think he noticed that in that first game, and since then, I think some people were thinking that Wemby might have a crazy season, postseason blocking shots, but in this particular case, he just decided that he's going to change up the way he plays defense, use his energy a little bit more conservatively, but also play defense a little bit more conservatively, not go after shots, be a bit more of a rebounder. And I think that he realizes his presence alone is able to essentially be what some people consider as a shot blocker, as there were just so many nopes in that Game 7 against Oklahoma City. Nopes, U-turns, pass out of, penetrating to the paint where usually a shot is put up. So there's so many things that come into effect when it comes to the Spurs needing to, defend the New York Knicks and also all of the things that happen along with that. So when the Spurs do defend the Knicks, is Wemby going to sort of be a roamer? Is he going to be pulled away by Karl Anthony Towns? Is he going to maybe switch on to OG Anunoby, who's a little bit less of a floor spacer than Karl Anthony Towns? So that'll be interesting to see how the Spurs end up handling Wemby being used on the defensive side of the ball. And the one thing that I guess really comes down to the Spurs and their ability to defend the Knicks is they'd be a little bit, hard-pressed to – I think the big thing they'd be hard-pressed to do is get out on all of the shooters. So are they going to chase all of the shooters off of the line and then proceed to – just have a whole bunch of swarming presences on the paint? Because the one thing that you look at, the first three opponents for the Spurs, they were not necessarily good shooting teams. So how do the Spurs handle all of the Knicks shooters and all the energy that comes along with it? So we will certainly keep an eye on all of that. But once we figure out how that works, I think that we'll get a little bit better of idea. Once game one happens, you start to see all the adjustments. That'll be the main thing, is because these two teams, granted, March was after the trade deadline. March was such a long time ago that I think both teams have figured out a little bit more of their identity. And the Knicks are the hottest team in the NBA right now. They've won 11 in a row. That is something that the Spurs certainly need to be aware of, is that this is going to be a team that, despite all of the rest/rust conversation that they're going to have coming into this series, they are a team that can beat them from the perimeter better than any team that they've faced so far. And they are coached by also, we talk about the Jeremy Sohan connection. Mike Brown's there. So Mike Brown is going to be able to maybe play a factor in this series. But I think that, Mike Brown, in his familiarity with the Spurs, sort of dips off a little bit in a way. He knows about the Spurs, but he was not on this coaching staff with Mitch Johnson, Sean Sweeney, Scott King, etc. So the Spurs will have to, figure out what they will be perceived to be known as. The opponents do sort of know the Spurs a little bit better than maybe the Spurs know the opponent in the Knicks, because I think the Knicks have some somewhat inside information on the Spurs with Mike Brown and Jeremy Sohan being affiliated with the Spurs previously. So they know a few things. And Mike Brown even joked that the Spurs are the team that he wanted to be in the finals because it would save him money. I didn't realize that Mike Brown's family still lives here in San Antonio. Makes sense. It's a nice place to live, and he will be somebody who I guess the Spurs will continue to always keep tabs on, because it's one of those Spurs family things. He is somebody who is well loved here in San Antonio, and Mike Brown will definitely get cheers from the Frostbank Center crowd tomorrow night in Game 1. And that'll be something to keep an eye on, is how the Spurs handle the Game 1 opponent of not knowing how the Knicks are going to defend them necessarily, because they've had so much time to game plan on how to defend the Spurs or the Thunder, because they got to watch the second half of that series just, probably as a group deciding, hey, when this happens, that's going to be how we react to it, because 7-game series, not only are the Spurs going to be tired, thank goodness for this 4-day stretch, thank goodness for home court advantage to where you don't have to travel to New York and deal with all the media day stuff for a couple days before the game. As the Knicks touchdown in San Antonio yesterday, if I remember correctly. In fact, there was a little bit of controversy. I don't know if you saw this, LG, but the Knicks, apparently their flight tracker, I didn't realize you could stalk like charter flights like this. Their flight tracker.
You can track any flight.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Every flight.
Yeah. Which makes sense, because now I see all these, like I think Taylor Swift was once criticized for taking like a 7-minute flight that went like 5 miles or whatever, something like that. But the Knicks flight was actually projected to go to Oklahoma City. So apparently they had already booked the flight to go to OKC previously on the scheduling of the Knicks going to the NBA Finals. So, hey, I'm glad that we were able to spoil that and change that up. So maybe the Knicks were really preparing for the Spurs on many levels. That comes down to the director of operations and stuff like that. But very, very kind of interesting side note about yesterday when people were tracking the Knicks plane coming into San Antonio. So, plenty more to talk about on the starting lineup as we roll on here on Ticket 760 and on YouTube. We'll step aside on both the stream and on radio, and when we come back, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the NFL. Some major trades go down yesterday, and we'll certainly get into all of that here on the starting lineup on Ticket 760. We'll be right back.
Smokey the Bear.
Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful, it's the least that you can do.
What you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com, and remember,
only you can prevent wildfires.
Brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
It is the starting lineup on Ticket 760. I'm your host, Karl Schoening. Happy you guys tuned into us, whether you're watching on the YouTube feed or listening over terrestrial radio on the iHeart app, all that fun stuff. We talk to you guys over our social media, so feel free to check in with us on X. I am at On Air Karl. I'm also on Instagram with the same handle. That is Karl with a K. LG, you can reach out to at DJLG210 on all reasonable social media platforms. LG, how else can they get involved in the show?
You can jump into the chat on YouTube at Starting Lineup Live. And you can hit us up on Twitter, TSL760.
Yeah, you guys.
And all our other socials as well at Starting Lineup Live.
Yes, sir. You guys can also buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the starting lineup. So we always appreciate that. I actually did not have enough time during that break to pour myself a coffee. So I'm looking forward to the next break to be able to finish off that coffee. Greg Castaneos, he's been here on our YouTube feed all show long. We appreciate him. He brought up something that I guess I didn't necessarily have ready to go, but the Corgi, LG, the Corgi has gotten sponsored by Yahoo. And I think tonight at 9 o'clock Central Time, they are going to live stream the Corgi's pick of the NBA Finals. So congratulations to the congratulations to the Corgi for getting a sponsor like that, going viral. And the Jackals have already pleaded to the dog, saying, "Hey, we've been through a lot. Don't pick the Knicks, please."
What a world we live in where a Corgi can get sponsored for doing a bit.
Yeah, well, the Corgi has a lot more social media followers than most people we know. Most animals tend to do that. Cute animals will
explains
sell.
Our state of society.
That is actually a very accurate thing to point out, LG, is society has found its way to, I guess, figure out a way to make a dog famous more than anything. Yesterday in the NFL, we talked about a little bit on the show about how the eventuality of A.J. Brown will be we need an Air Ellie Mae is what Greg says. Hey, we got to, now that I'm at my place and you're at your place, LG, we got to bring our animals on. Maybe that's our bit. Apparently it's 9 a.m. this morning, Greg. So thank you. I saw 10. I didn't actually look at the AM or the PM, but yes. Okay, good. So after the show, about an hour after the show, we will know the Corgi's pick, and hopefully, I hope Spurs in 5. I'm not going to necessarily make a prediction exactly right now. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking Spurs in 5, and hopefully the Corgi picks us up in Spurs in 5. Well,
Kendrick Perkins picked the Knicks to win, so if that's any sign, then the Spurs are definitely going to win.
Yeah, for sure. But, shifting gears to the NFL real quick. Yesterday we talked about it a little bit. It was a big day for the, NFL salary cap, which I still don't necessarily understand. And I need to just get somebody who's a capologist on here. And the Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett, gets traded to the Los Angeles Rams. And we weren't on the show during the NFL draft, but a lot of Rams fans were mad that they essentially drafted a backup quarterback and when they have Matthew Stafford in the first round. And I get why that's not necessarily a popular pick. You have a good quarterback. Why go with a backup like that? I think the big thing about that was they want the insurance, right? There's always the, hey, what if Matt Stafford goes down? Is the season just lost because we don't have a good quarterback? And I'm not saying you rely on a rookie quarterback to win, but I think it's better to invest your draft capital in your future, which is what the draft is about, than to maybe, if you feel like that's the move you want to make, maybe, say we're going to get a win-now player. And let me tell you, Myles Garrett is a win-now player. He was the most coveted player on the market that the Cleveland Browns said, we're not going to trade him, stop asking. However, behind the scenes, there were a lot of rumblings that the Browns were trying to trade the way you can structure draft picks being sent in a trade. And they ended up not getting that. I think they wanted to do something a little more ridiculous, like you can trade up to 7 years in the future in the draft. But that did not actually ever come into fruition. And I think the Browns realized that Myles Garrett, as good as he is, they need to capitalize on it. So Garrett is eventually traded to the Rams for Jared Versay, a 27 first-round pick and a 28 second-round pick, plus a 2029 third-round pick, all going to Cleveland. So Browns get a good pass rusher, but they also get a first, a second, and a third in consecutive years there. And I think that is a good haul for the Browns. They were obviously hoping for a lot more. Garrett's coming off of one of the most dominant seasons in NFL history with 23 sacks, setting a new single-season record. And he also shifted around some of his bonus payments from March into late summer. So I think that made his contract a little bit more appealing. But, Myles Garrett is somebody who is a fighting Texas A&M Aggie, so he has a lot of fans here in Texas. You know that all of the Cowboys fans were hoping that somehow Jerry Jones would make some kind of trade like that. He does not, and Myles Garrett is now a member of the Los Angeles Rams. And I saw some discourse on this, and I think one of the things that makes a lot of sense is, A, the fans were a little bit more, needed to be appeased to after dropping the first-round pick on a backup quarterback. So that was something that I think the front office was like, hey, we know what we're doing here. We're going to go ahead and bring in one of the best players in football, if not the best player in football, somebody who can really change the game there on the front line. And then on top of that, there's been a little bit of a murmur, maybe Aaron Donald comes out of retirement. And I had to look it up. For some reason, I thought Aaron Donald was younger than me. He's actually a little bit older than me. He's 35 years old. So he retired in 2023. And it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen somebody come out of retirement and I guess make a splash and play a little. However, if Aaron Donald's going to come out of retirement, I think he's going to say, why don't y'all get a few weeks into it? I'll get in shape, but I'm going to skip all the OTAs. I'm going to skip the preseason. It's 100% injury rate sport, football. So, if you're Aaron Donald, even if you're paid well, you're going to get hurt. It's just how football works. And I think when you really look at how I guess the Rams are going to be constructed, if Aaron Donald can come in knowing that he's not going to get double teamed constantly, maybe he does what Ndamukong Suh did, trying to win a ring at the end of his career with the Eagles and slide in somewhere around week 8. I think that would be something that would be along the lines of what we can expect if Aaron Donald comes back in. But, Myles Garrett, he's showtime. He's going to Hollywood. That is a big pickup. The other big trade yesterday was the one that finally happened, and I kind of knew that it was going to happen, but as an Eagles fan, I wasn't sure if it was really going to happen, and it ended up happening. The Philadelphia Eagles ended up trading A.J. Brown to the New England Patriots. The Eagles received a 2028 first-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick in return, and it also helps with their salary cap hit because I think if they had done it after yesterday's deadline for dead cap money, it would have worked. Again, I need to get somebody who can explain it to me like I'm 10. I understand the NBA salary cap pretty well front and back, even though they've thrown a few curveballs since 2023 with a new CBA and all the aprons. But when it comes down to the Eagles trading A.J. Brown, I'm not one to ever say that a guy is an issue, but there's the conversation of, was he a locker room issue? And A.J. Brown was not necessarily, in my eyes, creating some issues, but sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. And yesterday I thought that it was a lot of smoke where there was maybe just embers of a fire. But the Eagles, they drafted Mekhi Lemon out of USC. It seemed like a very popular pick. And, yeah. The next thing that the Eagles did was they got a Super Bowl by trading a first-round pick for A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown comes in. He signs a $100 million contract extension. He's still on that contract extension, and he will now be traded for a first-round pick. So the Eagles sort of come ahead, and I think that they'll be fine. Greg says, that's not good to make it public that you're an Eagles fan. My family's from Philadelphia, and I do enjoy the Eagles and the Cowboys rivalry. It's a lot of fun. And Hanover Fist also says, disappointed my Cowboys didn't land Garrett. Damn. Yeah, no, I understand that because Myles Garrett, hey, Max Crosby's still out there, right? Right? I need to double check if Max Crosby's still out there, but he was also tied to the Cowboys. And the Eagles also miss out on Myles Garrett. They were supposedly looking in on it, but that is a hefty price. A first round, a second round, and a third round in consecutive years. Hey, seems like a lot of Cowboys fans wanted Jerry to make the move. Jerry will not make the move, as Jerry often does not seem to make the move. However, we roll on here. Hour one will wrap up here on the starting lineup. When we come back, we'll step aside on both the stream and on YouTube. On the radio terrestrial airwaves as well. And we'll wrap up hour number one as I grab a little bit of coffee. We'll be right back on Ticket 760. It is the starting lineup on Ticket 760. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, as we wrap up hour number one. We're also streaming live on YouTube. That is the best way to get in contact with me, as I can see the comments coming up on my monitor. And I believe it was Hanover Fist who's in the chat asking me as an Eagles fan if I'm excited about the Eagles moving the A.J. Brown. One of the things about A.J. was I thought he was one of the most dynamic receivers in football, and he still is and can be, and Drake May gets himself his best target for sure. The Eagles do get a first-round pick in 2028 and a 2027 fifth overall pick for A.J. Brown. You know, it's one of those things where all season long there was this drama going on reportedly in the media, but all the Eagles fans thought it was just the media trying to create drama, which the media is so good at doing, and I try not to be one of those media members that creates drama, but I guess when you come down to the fact that there was maybe something there, because if there wasn't, he wouldn't be traded. But on top of that, when it mattered most, A.J. Brown last season did not come up. He didn't come up big. It didn't seem like Jalen Hurts was really looking for him. And then, I didn't really feel like A.J. Brown was checked in. And I wonder how much of that is because the media created the fire. Maybe he thought that there was somebody who was, I guess, leaking things that were happening in the locker room. Maybe that was along the lines. I never am a fan of losing one of your best players like that. These draft picks, they're not going to help the Eagles win this year. A lot of fans like Mekhi Lemon. They like what he's been doing in these OTAs and the rookie camps and such, but I don't necessarily think that the Eagles are happy with how everything went down. Maybe one day the full story, unfiltered, is going to come out, but I remember talking to Eagles fans who are much more locked in on what happens with the Eagles. They were saying that they felt that Diana Rossini was really a driving factor of this whole narrative that A.J. Brown was an issue in the locker room and proceeded to lead to him being traded. However, it maybe seems like maybe there was some truth to the Diana Rossini reporting, and I'm not going to get into that whole thing, but apparently there's improper relationships that's going on with Rossini and New England Patriots head coach Mike Vrabel, and Vrabel also coached A.J. Brown in Tennessee. So if there's anything that maybe is a connection there, maybe Vrabel heard some rumblings through his connections with A.J. Brown and decided to go ahead and put them out into the public. And then once it's in the public, it's asked about. And those are the things that I think are not always the best way for a season to, I guess, end up and come to a close, because it really was a mess there in terms of those conversations. But I suppose the other thing is that the Eagles get a first-round pick. They gave up a first-round pick for him. They get a first-round pick for A.J. Brown. So it's not like the Eagles are going to, I guess, feel like they lost anything. A.J. Brown was a big part of the Super Bowl winning team. And I personally don't buy too many jerseys. I have a Jalen Hurts jersey, but I'm not going to buy one of these receivers jerseys because I need to get a legend. I need to get somebody who's done something with the team. A.J. Brown did something with the team, but man, that's got to suck if you have a jersey and you end up only getting 1 year out of that, or I guess 2 years out of that jersey before he's traded again. And then do you wear the A.J. Brown jersey around? Interesting question there. That's something that I suppose we will have to figure out if you can do a trade-in program. I know that there's a lot of these insurance on your jerseys where if they're not there for the next 3 years, you can trade in the jersey. So maybe a fair amount of people are trading in the jersey. Well, we'll step aside here on the starting lineup, but when we come back at the top of the hour, we shift it back to Spurs talk here on Ticket 760. We'll be right back.
Smokey the Bear.
Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful, it's the least that you can do.
It's what you desire. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. And remember,
Only you can prevent wildfires.
brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Welcome into the starting lineup on Ticket 760. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, starting at the voice coming through your speakers. LG in the starting lineup with me, making sure we look and sound good. We have appreciated everybody who joins us on the YouTube feed today. A good conversation going on there. as we talked a good bit of NFL and the trades that happen at the June 1st deadline for the dead cap money to be stretched or extended or something along those lines. And a nice haul and saving some cap dollars as Hanover Fist is up in here giving us the conversation. Some other headlines going on today as, unfortunately, we have the passing of Rick Adelman, RIP. I do want to talk a little bit about Rick Adelman. I thought he was a great coach in the NBA for a long time. Steph Curry joins a new sneaker company, so his time with Under Armour is done. And I might have to maybe skip over this one, but the New York mayor is much more popular than the San Antonio mayor, and he repels bedtimes during the finals. So that'll be something that I guess we'll get a little bit into. But we are here on Ticket 760 in San Antonio, so we, of course, will be talking NBA Finals. And you know, the big question here is, how are the Spurs going to adjust to the big lights of New York when the series shifts back to Manhattan? And I feel like it's going to be different than it was in the regular season, because the one game in Madison Square Garden was after 2 off days in New York. They played in Brooklyn against the Nets on a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. Then they had Friday and Saturday off, and then they played Sunday morning. And I'm not saying that the Spurs went out and went crazy. I have no, details on any of that. However, it is human nature. And LG, I assume you would maybe know about this. Have you ever been to New York?
Yeah, many times.
It's a hard city not to have fun in. Like, I get Wimby maybe kept to his bedtime and all that kind of stuff, but who doesn't go out and enjoy the city that never sleeps? It is the hardest city in the NBA to stay cooped up in your hotel room.
I mean, if you've got money like an NBA player, you're probably having a good time in New York City.
Yeah, that definitely helps. And, I think it's going to be a business trip for the Spurs, is what I'm getting at. It's going to be very different from that March 1st matchup. And there's going to be a whole bunch of media already here in San Antonio. So that New York media overflow is going to be a factor for sure. However, you'll get that experience today at Media Day. After the show, I'm going to go on out to the Frost Bank Center, pick up my finals credential, and start mingling with the media. Maybe get some guests for the show throughout the week, and we'll definitely talk finals. But the one time that the Spurs met the Knicks, it was a end of a long road trip. It was the Spurs had won 11 in a row. They went undefeated in February, March 1st, and they ended up losing that game. So it's a little bit different of a story here, where the Spurs are now playing them in the playoffs. They have a lot of dedicated time to match up with them. And I think that when it comes down to the Spurs being in a big city like New York, you're not going to have to worry about that. But what a big contrast it is for the finals from the first 3 rounds. You have sleepy Portland, which is probably among the smallest markets in the NBA, right? Like, there's a lot of good nature there, but there's nothing much to do in Portland. Not that, again, the Spurs are treating any of this like a fun trip out there, but it's a long 4-hour flight out to the great Northwest. So maybe a little bit less of the media attention there in Portland. Then Minnesota, we talked about this, LG. It's not that far away, but it feels far away. It's a big tundra. And again, we decided that we weren't interested in going there. And then Oklahoma City, the shortest of the flights, but OKC might be the sleepiest town of all the 3 that the Spurs ended up playing in, because it's Oklahoma City. And they have a zoo, I guess. But now you have New York City. And not that there's one Spur that I think will go out and be a little crazy to, say, oh, hey, we're going to have a couple off days in New York. No, the Spurs will treat this as a business trip. It's just a very big city, and we'll have to see how they go through with everything. But they usually stay pretty close to where it's only about a 20-minute bus ride to Madison Square Garden. So that'll be an interesting factor just for the media presence alone, but the finals are always a big media presence. You'll be out there for game 1 tomorrow night, right? You'll be working?
I'll be out there for game 1 at the Frost Bank Center, where you can get Fiesta t-shirts. They're doing the Fiesta bid again. and I think they say finals on them this time.
Oh, nice. I gave away the Western Conference final one. I had to get rid of that bad juju after the last time they did the Fiesta colors was game 3 of the Western Conference finals. And I like the bit. It's a goated t-shirt arrangement. I think all the fans enjoy it as well, although I imagine there's going to be plenty of fans that are like, I wanted the blue one. I really wanted the blue one or the orange one or the pink one. And they
trade
don't.
with someone. I'm sure there's plenty of people that are like, hey, I had the blue one last time. Give me the orange one. So make some trades.
Trade with them after the color scheme that the team worked so hard to establish.
And if you don't get your size, go to guest services because they put all XLs out, and you could probably go to guest services, get a different size, and maybe they might hook you up with the color of your choice as well.
Yeah, I saw that. I meant to read into the story a little bit more, but I saw that the Spurs are cracking down on price gouging, which I appreciate because it's already expensive enough. I had a few people float out some tickets to offer other people, and it was like $850 a pop. And that's quite a bit of money to go to a basketball game. And hey, Greg Castanuelo is in here, and he says he'll take a blue LG. So maybe you sneak him a blue. I'll have to see which one I get.
Are you an XL, Greg? Because usually the only ones I have access to are XLs, and I'm not allowed to trade them in. So
no, yeah, you're not. Once we put on that media credential, we sort of have to be held to a different standard. But the big thing is that I'm getting at here is I think that as young as this Spurs team is, as much as some people might want to say you have the bright lights of New York, and it's the first time in this playoff run that the Spurs are going up against a big major media market team, doesn't really feel like that big of a deal. Maybe, I think that it's probably one of the things that I remember in that trip to New York. Dylan Harper didn't play well against the Nets, and it was a sort of a homecoming. So, yeah, Greg is an XL. I appreciate you, Greg. But it was a homecoming of sorts, right? So when you talk about Dylan Harper coming back, I think he's going to have some extra emotions. He played at Rutgers. There was this great bit that apparently I think he did when he was a draft prospect where he was interviewing several Knicks about being from the New York area. Jalen Brunson and him kind of got into a funny little spat. So, I think when it comes down to the Spurs and the New York connection, there aren't enough issues with that I think it'll be a big deal. I remember talking to my dad back in the 2007 finals, and the Spurs been there, done that, literally owned that T-shirt. It was on the way to the 4th championship, and it was NBA Finals Media Day, and the Spurs come in, they handle their business, they do the press conferences, and then next thing you know, here come the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they have cameras, and they're excited about the moment, and there's no shame in that, but it was very much a you could tell who had been there before scenario. This is a situation where the Spurs and the Knicks are both playing in their first finals as a unit. So I think that throws a little bit of a wild card into this conversation. I think the Knicks, their only goal here in San Antonio, obviously if they want to be greedy, is to win both and aim for a sweep, but they just want to go for one win, claim that home court advantage, and see if they can figure out a way to defend Wemby. Good luck. But it really is one of those things where when you talk about the Spurs and the Knicks, the matchups are interesting, but I feel like people need to match up with the Spurs more than the Spurs need to match up with anybody else. And I thought that was very apparent in the Minnesota series when you're talking about a front line of Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle and Jaden McDaniels, 3 big, long guys. And I thought the Spurs might go with the Cornet French Vanilla lineup out there with Wemby at the 4, and they didn't. They very rarely have gone with the French Vanilla lineup this entire series. So I think that's one of the things to keep an eye on is how are the Spurs going to make the Knicks adjust more than the Spurs adjusting to the Knicks, because the Spurs, they did exactly what you should do with a generational big man in 2026. They surrounded him with shooters. You have De'Aaron Fox, who can knock down jump shots. You have Steph Castle, who initially in the playoffs, several teams decided we're going to make Steph Castle beat us with his shooting. And he proceeded to shoot 43% from three in those first two rounds against the Timberwolves and the Blazers because of that defensive strategy implemented. That is not something OKC decided to do, where previously we thought that maybe they would throw Alex Caruso on Victor Wembanyama. They realized that that was not a good plan. And because Steph Castle has become a good three-point shooter, if you're going to dare him to make those threes. Love Steph Castle and everything he brings to the table. I know occasionally those turnovers make Spurs fans mad, but he will more often than not make the right play. But also at the same time, I know that he has a little Manu in him. He has a little Russell Westbrook in him where you have to sort of live with the turnovers as they come. So that's something to keep an eye on there, as the Spurs will try and figure out how to inflict their will on the Knicks, and the Knicks will have to adjust to the Spurs is what I'm getting at. I don't see anything that the Knicks can necessarily do that will make the Spurs change how they play. I think the big key for the Spurs is to chase the Knicks off the three-point line and try and funnel them to Victor Wembanyama, who will have to sort of roam. And if Wemby's guarding Karl Anthony Towns and Wemby's protecting the rim, and you essentially need to let Karl Anthony Towns beat you from spacing the floor, then that's going to be an experiment the Spurs probably try out, because that is the one unique thing. Let me think real quick. Is there anybody the Spurs have really played that just played a stretch five the entire time? No, I guess not. Donovan Clingan, if he wanted to shoot threes, that was fine. You look at the Rudy Gobert, of course, if Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert wanted to hang out at the three-point line, be our guest. Isaiah Hartenstein ended up being the majority of the minutes against Wemby against OKC. So this will be the first time the Spurs have actually played a five-out offense when Karl Anthony Towns is on the court, you're going to have to respect the spacing that the Knicks actually create. However, this is not the first time that the Spurs have had to deal with closing out on shooters and rotating around. So I think that that's going to be something to keep an eye on for the Spurs, is how they handle dealing with a five-out offense for really the first time in these playoffs. That'll be the majority of the minutes, as I assume Karl Anthony Towns is going to be playing the five and maybe not defending Wemby the whole time, but there's going to be that matchup where at least Wemby's probably going to be on the assignment of Karl Anthony Towns. Do you maybe switch that up and maybe OG Anunoby is who Wemby guards? We'll have to see. These are the conversations that we can have here on the media that we won't find out until game one of the NBA Finals. And, man, I really appreciate this break for the Spurs because I feel like they needed it. You talk about the Knicks having not played in what feels like a month now, and they probably are nice and well rested, but I get the feeling the Spurs can jump out and take an early lead, punch first, and that's been the Spurs' MO. If they can punch first and get an early lead, then you have to feel pretty good because they do a good job protecting those leads, and if they do lose those leads, then they jump right back in, and I think if you remember Game 7 against the Thunder, there were two scenarios where the Thunder actually took a 2-point lead, and Keldon Johnson knocked down a couple threes, gave the Spurs the lead back, and the rest is history. The Spurs would proceed to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals. So, looking forward to all of the fun stuff that comes out of the Spurs and the Knicks in Game 1. Looking forward to all the sound bites and media clips that we'll be able to play tomorrow as we preview and hear from the people that really matter. Certainly not me, the people actually in the starting lineup. The Victor Wembanyama's, the Jalen Brunsons, the De'Aaron Foxes. And the Spurs, I feel like, have a good chance to come away with a victory. And if the Spurs can, I guess, figure out a way to slow down the Knicks' three-point shooting, then they should be able to come away with the win in this series. And a lot of people are hesitant about how they're going to pick it. Is it going to be Spurs in 5? Is it going to be Spurs in 6? Do the Knicks come around and maybe punch the Spurs in the mouth and reclaim or claim home court advantage and then end up winning this in 6 in Madison Square Garden? We'll have to see. It's obviously I'm not a big fan of predicting the future. I think it's a little crazy how much money goes into trying to predict the future, but that's what I guess we're sort of assigned to do here. I like to talk about the matchups and what the Spurs can do defensively and all those things that come into it. But the Spurs and the Knicks finally tomorrow, but we're going to have a lot of content today. It's not a game, but it is the media day, and it should be a fun one on the Spurs home court of the Frost Bank Center. I'll be out there with a lot of the media members that have been flocking into San Antonio over the last couple days. And in fact, there's a media mingle tonight that I need to double check the time on, but I hope I didn't miss it. I don't think it was last night, but I'm pretty sure it's tonight here, the night before the finals, to where we all get to talk about what we have, and maybe I'll be able to line up some guests as well. We'll step aside here on Ticket 760, but the conversation continues on the stream when we come back here on the starting lineup. Starting lineup on Ticket 760 rolls on here. I am your host, Karl Schoening, starting at the voice coming through your speakers. You can get in touch with me on social media at OnAirKarl. You can get me there on my handle on X and Instagram. LG in the starting lineup with me. You can reach out to him at DJLG210. And man, you know, LG, during the break on the stream, we went into not necessarily sports. We talked a little bit of life and Seattle. That is one of my favorite cities that I've only been to a couple of times, and I'm excited for them to get a NBA team. And I think we were talking about it yesterday that when the Thunder lost to the Spurs, they played it at the Mariners ballpark, and everybody went wild when the Spurs won.
That's true, because they're bitter.
Yeah,
bitter fans.
They lost their team, and they have not gotten their team back, but I'm excited for the NBA to eventually return to Seattle. You know, one of the things that came across the news headlines yesterday was that Steph Curry ended up signing a deal with a Chinese company where he left the Under Armour, who he had been with for a while. This comes down from Shams Charania yesterday. Golden State Warrior star Steph Curry has signed an endorsement deal with Chinese company, and forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, Li Ning, ending a drawn-out recruitment process following Curry's departure from Under Armour in November. Curry announced the end of his sneaker deal free agency Monday with a landmark deal with Li Ning? I'm going to have to actually hear how it's said, which expands his Curry brand venture globally. The agreement will include basketball products, athleisure wear? Is that athleisure lifestyle wear? Okay, I need to learn how to read a little better. I am dyslexic. The ability for Curry to sign male and female athletes under his brand and a full golf line. So Curry is somebody who is probably going to try and get on some kind of celebrity golf tour when he retires, but he signs this deal, and I've never heard of Li Ning, which is why every time I see it, it sort of has to register in my head. But he opted for Li Ning over pitches from American and foreign companies. One factor in Curry's ultimate decision was his comfort while testing shoes of two Li Ning signature athletes, Jimmy Butler and his fellow Warriors teammate Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade. So I suppose they will allow him to bring on athletes and make him the main star. And Steph Curry is somebody who he's definitely in his final years in the NBA, but this is a splash around the shoe world. And I wonder now, didn't you just buy some Steph Curry's, or like a Steph Curry affiliated shoe that's like De'Aaron Fox's or something along those lines?
They're Steph Curry. They're the Curry's De'Aaron Fox edition. So I wondered if De'Aaron Fox's new shoes going forward lose the Curry logo, but still continue the Fox logo, because it has both Curry's logo and Fox's logo on them.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you know, Curry split from Under Armour after a 13-year partnership, and it was a mutual decision in November. So Curry was, expressing gratitude and probably let me think about this, 13 years for Steph Curry. He was probably already
he left
a
in
star.
November, huh?
Yeah, I guess he was already.
De'Aaron Fox just released some new shoes, so I wonder if they have the Currys on to check them out at one of the sporting goods stores here. But if this Chinese company Li Ning is like any other Chinese manufacturer, the shoes are probably way more comfortable than anything an American manufacturer has ever made, and they're way more affordable, and they're way more advanced.
Yeah, I think that was what I was getting at, is that Curry was going for comfort and maybe style, I suppose. But
they'll probably be banned in the USA, so the competition won't be allowed against our insufficient companies that are from the USA.
Yeah, well, they're certainly going to get hit with an import tax, I suppose. This is an interesting part of the story. Curry immediately sparked a high-profile recruitment during a Warriors road trip in San Antonio, wearing Nike Kobe 6 Mambasita sneakers to warm up in a pregame and shuffling through a number of various brands over the preceding months. So if y'all remember, that was actually the Warriors' last push of being a franchise that looked like they wanted to make a run, were those 2 games, back-to-back games, in November. They were epics. I think the biggest highlight that came out of that was Draymond Green was getting in the face of Wemby, and then Wemby proceeded to spin off the baseline and dunk over him, and it didn't count. They called that a foul in the motion of the pass, which didn't make sense. I can't remember exactly why they didn't just count the bucket and make that a highlight that will forever count. But even though it didn't count, it's still something that's pretty popular. But interesting to see that this whole thing started back in November when the Spurs were in San Antonio. So I guess, congratulations to Steph Curry on his new deal. And I am size 14. It is near impossible for me to find shoes, and I'm somebody who needs to test out my shoes. I guess we live in this world where I can return anything that I buy within the 30 or 90 day window, but I don't like that hassle usually. So that's something interesting that came down on the NBA wire the other day in the social media world of just getting push notifications from Shams Charania. The other thing that I thought was interesting yesterday in the news cycle was, if there's one area that the Knicks have the advantage over the Spurs and LG, it's the mayor. I think Zoran Mamdani, I don't know if you saw this. Apparently, Fox News has been told to stop playing Mamdani's policies as they are too popular among everybody. And I think he also balanced the book for the first time in New York's recent history. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, he reduced their deficit to 0.
Yeah, all the things that he's been doing over the last, 6 months as the mayor has made him super popular. On the other side,
yeah, it's crazy what happens when a politician actually does something that helps out the general public. It's interesting.
We could use a little more of that in the world as opposed to all of the just name calling. I'm not going to name names. We don't want to talk politics, but this one seemed reasonable enough because I do like Mamdani, at least the persona he puts out there. He's the 112th mayor of New York City, and he signed an executive order on Monday with the title "Repealing Kids' Bedtimes for Knicks Finals Run." The New York Knicks face the Spurs, obviously, starting tomorrow night, and that is a 8:30 start in New York time. So the Spurs are going to the Spurs and Knicks are probably going to go until around 10 o'clock, I suppose. Mamdani signed the document with a group of young students around his desk who wore Knicks jerseys, and he even asked them who was born in 1999 or who was alive in 1999, and obviously none of those kids were, but there's always that one kid that enthusiastically lied and said that he was. And Mamdani, he seems like just a likable guy. And I'm not going to pick on our mayor too much, but it's obvious that she's not as likable. And I'm a little surprised that she's not trying a little harder to maybe try and make amends here in the finals run. The props passed, and she was even at a game. Did you see that, LG, that she was at a game?
No.
No, she was at a Spurs game the other day, and the funny thing is, I think I passed by her, and I'm thinking I know that person, but I don't, have time. I'm on my way back up to the radio row, and Had I known that it was her, I probably would have had to fight off the intrusive thoughts of the Aggie fan in me, because I do like the Aggies. I didn't go to Texas A&M, but I enjoy the cult that they are. And I don't know if you know this about the Aggies, LG. They hiss. So as I was walking by her, if I had known that it was her, I might have had to fight off the intrusive thoughts at her. Have you ever?
Okay.
Have you ever been to an Aggie game?
No, I've been invited to several of them though, and I just haven't been able to go. And yeah, they hiss. They don't have cheerleaders. They yell.
They yell leaders, yeah.
Yeah. So
They
yeah,
have a dance squad.
No, well, so do the Spurs.
They do. Yeah, the hype squad. But no, I just, to wrap that up, I think that's the one edge that the Knicks clearly have over the Spurs is they have a super popular mayor. And, I appreciate him. He's only 34 years old. Yeah. And, fun fact, that Go Spurs Go that we play is actually the mayor. So, we got her. She just, she's an outsider, and I think she's trying to make a political name for herself. And I think sometimes when you try too hard to do something, it maybe backfires on you, and that is certain. I'll be on WAI after our show today, LG, and I might have to bring that up with Chris Duell and Mr. T because in Charity over there, because that is certainly the how I'll probably start that conversation with them. The one edge that the Knicks have over the Spurs is the mayor. So yeah, that's I guess how it goes here in San Antonio. However, anywhere else, I am trying to think really hard. I think the Spurs have the edge almost everywhere. Maybe I will give Jalen Brunson, who's a MVP candidate, borderline top 5 player, depending on how you want to rank your players. He will probably be considered better than the Spurs guards. However, the Spurs 300 point guard monster will take on any opposing point guard lineup. The wings for the Spurs, I think that they're just as equal, if not more equal than the Knicks when you consider that the Spurs and the Knicks, it's going to come down to their shooting because both of them bring defensive effort. So shooting's the one thing that, hey, you can be consistent, but it's sometimes a series you're cold. Shout out to Julian Champagnie. He was cold the first few games of the Western Conference Finals. He shook it off. He had a big Game 5, he had a big Game 6, and he had a big Game 7. And that's how shooting goes. If you remember Danny Green, who I kind of compared Champagnie to earlier in the show, Danny Green went off in the 2013 finals. He was going to win finals MVP, and then the Heat decided that they're not going to let Danny Green beat them, and Danny stopped being as efficient as he was. But, that's going to be the big thing here is where can the Knicks really find the edge outside of mayor politics? We'll step aside here on the show. We'll talk a little bit more about the news around the world of sports, a little bit about that matchup in the finals, and the conversation continues on the stream after a brief break on our YouTube feed as well. Keep it tuned in here to the starting lineup on Ticket 760.
Smokey the Bear.
Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful, it's the least that you can do.
What you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com. And remember,
Only you can prevent wildfires.
brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
This is the starting lineup on Ticket 760. I'm your host, Karl Schoening. Along with me in the starting lineup, LG. The conversation continues occasionally on the YouTube stream, and sometimes we need a break, such as getting a little bit more coffee. You know who's happiest about this setup, LG, where I can, call these things from home? My cat. She's definitely, come by and said what's up a couple times. She always hated to see me go in the morning, and I always hated saying goodbye to her, and we'll have to make her have an appearance on the YouTube feed. I want to get Ellie Mae, your dog, on here too. And we need to capitalize on cute animals. That is the key. If the Corgi has taught us anything, it's that we need to get a bit for our cute animals because they are more likely to get social media following than us.
That's true. People love animals more than they love humans. So.
Yeah. Understandable.
And I understand the appeal.
Yeah. The Corgi got a deal. If y'all missed it, we talked about it in the first hour. The Corgi is going to be, the guest picker on the feed for Yahoo. They're going to continue to have the Corgi make an appearance, and a lot of Spurs fans are saying, "Hey, Corgi, you gotta pick us. That'd be great if you could pick us, and we get a Corgi selection of the Spurs to win the NBA Finals." One of the things that I think about this series is really it kind of comes down to the coaching, and there is Mike Brown, who has significantly more experience coaching than Mitch Johnson. However, Mitch Johnson has been with the Spurs for so long. Mitch and I were in Austin together when I first started out doing Austin Spurs. I didn't get to know him there, but it was one of those scenarios where Mitch and I always kind of knew of each other, and he always says hello as we continue to bump into each other over the course of a decade now. And while Mike Brown has done a great job with the Knicks, and after being down 2-1 and people were calling for his job, he turned things around and has gotten the Knicks to play at the highest level that the Knicks have played all season. They're playing at that highest level at the right time as well. I also think there's something to be said about the continuity of Mitch Johnson being with this group from the ground floor. And this is his second year with the Spurs. Technically speaking, it's his first full season. Last year, he originally was contributing to Pop's record, but then on July 3rd, they decided that, hey, all the Mitch Johnson coached games since Pop had to step aside will count towards Mitch Johnson's record. And if it weren't for that little caveat, Mitch Johnson probably would be among the best percentages all time of coaching. So that's pretty impressive that Mitch has done the job that he's done to get the Spurs to this point. But also at the same time, you have Mike Brown, who has gotten the Knicks over the proverbial hump of getting to the finals. So I guess one of the things that comes down to it is the way that the Spurs have the coaching matchup against Mike Brown will be sort of an interesting thing to see, because Brown's won championships, with multiple teams. Mitch has been on the Spurs since they were basically the end of the Kawhi era through now. Greg is in here on our YouTube chat asking, not trying to be funny, Karl, but as Mitch's voice always sounded like that, like Doc Rivers. And, I haven't spent enough time with him to know what his voice sounds like when it isn't raspy from yelling at the over crowds. But that guy, Mitch Johnson, coaches as hard as any of the players play. He is out there yelling and trying to give instructions as much as he can from the sideline. So when you do hear him in the post-game conversations, which we play here on the starting lineup fairly often, you do hear a good amount of that raspiness that comes from just having to yell over 20,000 people in a given night. You'd be amazed how it's hard to hear someone who is 10 feet away in NBA arenas. It is, you have to really raise your voice and try and get their attention, and they almost need the assistance of being able to see your lips move to actually register what you're saying. So, Mitch, I think you'll hear him have a very raspy voice throughout the finals. MSG is going to be rocking. The Frost Bank Center is going to be loud. And hopefully neither one of these coaches lose their voices for the post-game press conferences that we end up playing here on the show. Another show flies by, LG. I'm looking forward to the media day today and all the stuff that happens. I've been asked to be on 3 or 4 shows. I'm going to have to protect my energy and just say yes to the people that I really trust. So I'm probably going to be up in Austin. I don't want to be on any shows in New York, because next thing you know, they might corner me with some questions. Our friend Dylan Emery was on a show in San Diego, and they've made him their Spurs insider, and they ask him some out there questions that he sort of prefers not to ask. So I'm glad that Dylan beat me to the punch, because I was going to say, I'll jump on in San Diego. Then that was back in like the second round of the playoffs against the Timberwolves, and Dylan's told me that they asked him out there questions, but he's always happy to join them, and I'm happy that he beat me to that, because I don't want to be asked out there questions. I enjoy the questions that we have. It's exciting times here in San Antonio. I love how the city's gotten behind the Spurs, and one of the things I want to talk about when we come back is how the Spurs are getting behind the city, as obviously San Antonio and the Spurs are interconnected in such a great way. And we'll touch on that. As somebody who was born and raised in San Antonio, is that right, LG?
Raised.
You were raised here? Okay, yeah. You've been here long enough. You're proto San Antonio, so I want to get your take on just how the city has gotten behind on. Did I say that wrong? I see you laughing on the stream.
Yeah, you need to work on your Spanish pronunciation.
No.
It's Greg Castanuela. Greg Castaneros.
I can't see. The text is a little small on the monitor that I'm reading, so I need to squint in. I need to get glasses probably, but we'll step aside. When we come back, we wrap up the show here on Ticket 760, and then it'll be Dan Patrick after that. We'll step aside on the frequency, but we'll still continue the conversation on the YouTube stream. Stick with us here on the starting lineup. This is the starting lineup on Ticket 760. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, wrapping up the show. Happy you guys. This is the starting lineup on Ticket 760. I'm your host, Karl Schoening, wrapping up the show. Happy you guys tuned in with us on the frequency of AM 760. And if you've been in the chat, it's been a fun one today on the YouTube channel. We have basically just decided that I'm going to call Greg Cast because you can't understand my Spanish. He's joining us in the conversation, said, "Don't worry, Karl, I don't speak Spanish, but if I did, the people from Mexico will still make fun of the Mexican-American people born that speak Spanish." So, I mentioned in the live stream during the break on the radio that I dated a woman who her entire family's from Mexico. She was from Houston, but she would identify as Mexican, and it was always the topic of conversation that I was not too good at speaking Spanish, and I continued to get that grief from LG during the break. So, but LG, whether we speak Spanglish, Spanish, English here in San Antonio, I have never seen the city so much backing the Spurs. And I've been in this city for a while. I've covered the Spurs for a long time, and I know that the
not
NBA
long enough, apparently.
Yeah, but
since you've never seen the city behind the Spurs like that.
But correct me if I'm wrong. They were not shutting down the streets of commerce and military like they were for...
People were going honking in 1999, Karl.
No. I know they were, but they weren't out where essentially you had a full-blown block parties is what it felt like. It feels like...
They were.
To get to the finals like that,
Every
the
championship.
Well, no, I know when they won the championship.
You need to know the history about military. Military, they go down there and celebrate. They used to do it every single Sunday, no matter what, Spurs or no Spurs. So that's a long time tradition in San Antonio. And it just so happened that when the Spurs win, they do the honking on military. So,
interesting.
Military has been a long time tradition for driving down. Before I was born, people were driving down military in their lowriders, just having block parties. Sunday block party on military is a tradition that goes decades.
So there you go. This is why I bring you on or I brought you on for this particular segment and why I asked you, because it is something that is a little new to me in that sense, but it hasn't quite. I feel like the NBA is much more popular now than it was even in 2014 when the Spurs won. And Greg says I wasn't born in 1999. I was 8. But when it comes to, I guess, just the overall vibe, is communication a lot easier now? Everybody's going here to party, and there's going to be videos and such, and all those kinds of things. Like, am I wrong that it seems and feels bigger, and the city's a bit more united?
Yeah, maybe you're just able to see it more because people are posting on social media and all that stuff. So maybe you're just able to see the celebrations more. It's more in your face. I think it was only before when you saw the celebrations, you had to be there to see it. Now you're getting videos.
That's probably what it is. I feel like, social media has exploded so much over the course of the past, I guess, 6 years that in 2014, maybe you had Facebook and Instagram was very much in the infancy of what it is, and Twitter.
Well, I joined Facebook in college, so that's 2004, something like that.
But now, like, everybody's on it, and that's the big thing. And for those of you that I guess haven't been keeping up with the show, Dan Patrick's coming up next, and he is the highest rated sports show in town. So some of y'all might be leading into it. The Corgi is going to be picking the finals in a bit, and if you are on the live stream, you are seeing me force cuddle my cat Pearl. I will try and figure out a way for Pearl to predict the finals winner, and just to let you know, it'll probably be rigged. If she somehow picks the Knicks, I'm going to figure out a way to make her pick the Spurs. As that's the next thing up. And then you have a cute dog, Ellie Mae. So we're gonna have to figure out a way, maybe not to get them to meet. I think she's scared of dogs, my cat Pearl, but. We got to take advantage of this and get some starting lineup content out there, and I'm sure that'll go more viral than anything that we can do without our animals. Anyhow, she's over it. She's actually not over it. She's very interested in what's going on here. She didn't want to be picked up at first, but now my cat's on my lap. So one of the joys of watching us on our YouTube feed. But yeah, no, maybe you're right in the sense that it's not that it's more popular, but that the city's not behind the team anymore, but it's definitely people have much easier access to cinema line cameras, right? You see all these people who are being able to put out some high quality video content, take high quality photos.
It's not that; it's the phones. That's the thing.
That's true too.
Not everybody has a cinema camera. It's the phones.
The iPhones.
Nobody really cares if you have a cinema camera anymore. You have phones, it's instant access to your social media.
That's true.
You don't have to download it from your camera.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting. But I guess that's the way that the world is working right now. Spurs, Knicks, today's the finals day. Looking forward to seeing how the Spurs are able to handle all the media pressure. I'm sure they'll do it with flying colors as the San Antonio Spurs get ready to face off the New York Knicks in the NBA Finals. We will talk about all that. We will get some sound from later on today to play tomorrow's show. Once again, you can catch us on the starting lineup at 6 o'clock in the morning here on Ticket 760 on the YouTube feed. So for LG running the show, making sure I stay on time, reminding me how to close out a show for our animals, Ellie Mae and Pearl, who will try and get their social media debuts to pick the Spurs. It'll be rigged. Hopefully the Corgi also predicts the Spurs here as we roll on. We'll step aside here on the conversation on the radio, but it always continues on the show here on Ticket 760.